Hi, folks, and welcome to White Collar Week. It's the isolation that destroys us. The solution is in community. Today on the podcast, we have Bridgeport Mayor Joseph Ganim. After 5 terms as the mayor of the largest city in the state of Connecticut from 1991 to 2003, Joe was brought down in a corruption scandal for which he served 6 years in a federal prison. After his release from prison, in 2015, Joe ran again for mayor of Bridgeport, and he was reelected. He is currently serving his 7th term as mayor. What I find most fascinating about Joe is his resilience and resourcefulness, his willingness to take risks and subject himself to public scrutiny after all he'd been through. Certainly, his story is a lesson to other people convicted of felonies that life is not over once you go to prison. Full disclosure. In 2016 and 2017, I served as co-chairperson of the advisory board to the City of Bridgeport Mayor's Initiative on Reentry Affairs. So coming up, Mayor Joseph Ganim on White Collar Week. I hope you will join us. Hello, and welcome to White Collar Week, a podcast sponsored by Progressive Prison Ministries, the world's first ministry serving the white-collar justice community. I'm Jeff Grant, co-founder and your host. I served almost 14 months in a federal prison for a white-collar crime I committed when I was a lawyer, so I know that it's the isolation that kills us, and the solution is in community. So let's get started. Hi, folks, and welcome to White Collar Week. We have a very special show today. We have Mayor Joe Ganim, who's the mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut. And as you might know, Joe served a bunch of years in a federal prison on a corruption crime, which we'll talk just a little bit about, because we're really much more interested in his white-collar perseverance story and how he was able to overcome a lot of his issues. And it's a fascinating story. Babs Rawls-Ivy and I had him on Criminal Justice Insider about a year ago, and he was so compelling that we wanted to ask him back to be on White Collar Week. So, Mayor Ganim, Joe, welcome to White Collar Week.
Jeff, thank you so much, one, for having me, reaching out, but I think on a much more broader perspective for what you do every week to have a kind of a spot or a place for so many individuals that may not exist otherwise in their lives, trying to kind of figure out, or let's call it the aftermath, probably not a good term, of, hey, so many people have gone through the difficulties of not only incarceration and separation from family and friends, and kind of however they got there, however I got there, or you come back out and trying to put pieces together. And it's such a nice thing. And I've been more of an observer, feeling guilty about that, not doing enough in the world of kind of reentry, in the world of kind of understanding post-incarceration. And helping people is, I can see behind you, and if they can see the podcast, finding hope and purpose after incarceration. So thanks for all you do. I appreciate having me on today.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make full disclosure that I was actually the co-chair of the first year advisory board to your mayor's initiative for reentry affairs, which is really a banner initiative in the city of Bridgeport, and just received some large grants along with career resources in the workplace. So I think it's a good time for us to be talking not just about white-collar experience, but about criminal justice and reentry in general. So why don't you give us a few minutes on your background? Did you grow up in Bridgeport?
Sure.
And kind of what led you into a life of service to begin with?
Yeah, interesting. I did grow up mostly here, and I do want to go right back to the grant, the funding that was announced earlier this week. I think that's a kind of a nice little launching pad to talk about separation from families and what the program, and thanks to federal funding, is going to allow us collectively to do. I say us, I mean the entities, the nonprofit entities that have come together, the city of Bridgeport and others, hopefully to make a positive impact and to help individuals kind of figure it out. Parenting, separation, and then reconnecting. But it was the Bridgeport story. Yeah, I grew up most of my life here, and also in a place called Easton, which is less than 5 miles away, but kind of worlds apart. Bridgeport's being the largest city in the state of Connecticut. For those who don't know, I don't know how wide the audience is, but we're still a relatively small city by national standards, but still a large city nonetheless, with all the challenges of every major urban center. And then also had the experience of growing up in a small town, about as small as you can get, probably 5,000 or 6,000 people, almost a farm town, somewhat upscale suburb. And so I lived both those places, but moved back into Bridgeport at an early age after becoming a lawyer, and was really involved and enjoyed the profession as a lawyer. And I did a lot of criminal defense work. I did a lot of other stuff. I come from a family of lawyers. I have a large family and had 7 siblings, 4 brothers and a sister who all, along with my dad, also were attorneys. So there was a rewarding opportunity as far as a profession goes, I found. Certainly maybe understand challenges people could have in the criminal side of this thing if you're a defendant. Never thought I'd be sitting in the other chair behind the table in the courtroom, but it happened. And I made a commitment to try and enter public service, if you call it politics. You can choose your term, but helped others originally and then ran for office with not a real clear direction on ever becoming a chief executive or mayor of Bridgeport particularly. I actually ran for state representative. And I thought, geez, you can do some stuff up there. There's a lot of people up there. You be part of making law and help people in a smaller section or district, and to continue to go on with what was my kind of full-time job and anything else that I'd going on in my life. But there was a point where I decided maybe I could do better and had something to offer to Bridgeport, and there was lacking leadership at the time. So fast forward, I did that at a very young age, got elected, and I think the reason I was able to come back after everything, which we'll spend some time talking about, meaning all the legal challenges and personal challenges and everything else that kind of went on while in office, I guess, but also following resignation and all that and being incarcerated, was we really worked hard at the time to make a difference in people's lives in the city of Bridgeport. And I guess by objective standards, and only because I'm sitting here again, I think I can say it was probably by objective standards. The people, by and large, felt that we had done a good job, because I don't think they would have ever reelected me after, well, one, you don't get reelected if you don't do a good job to start with. Never mind getting indicted, tried, convicted, incarcerated, and then coming back out for in this case was quote unquote municipal corruption. Unless people thought there was something more there than just another individual. So I give a lot of credit to the people who were part of what was 11 years of transformative work in the city of Bridgeport, both visually, in other words, what people could see and feel on the waterfront, in bringing in sports teams and building arenas and public safety, where we saw effects on violent crime and impacts with partnership and so on, but also some of the maybe less physical or tangible things that I think departments were able to do. So I'll take some of the credit for bringing in people that were smarter and better than me. If there was blame, I get the blame for what we did wrong. And then at some point, if you're in there, you're part of, I think, everyone who can say we did a good job. So I think people associated me with that when I came back. And as difficult as it was, and I know we want to talk about this, because I think the reentry aspect of the forcing, the pushing, the fighting, the barriers that are there when you come out, no matter who you are, no matter what your situation in life is, whether you were on the top of the world before and think you can go back to the top of the world, whatever that might be for you in your life, or you feel like you're at the lowest spot and that you can't even step up on the curb without falling off. I think there's ways in which, as I know you emphasize with people every day, it's all in how you approach it. It's all in how you approach yourself and those barriers, and how you don't let them beat you down, and you set realistic goals for yourself and your family, and then you try to attain them.
So let's go back to 1990 or so. And you're a lawyer, you're in a family law firm, or you're in a family of lawyers. I don't know if you were actually in the family law firm, because I know Ganim is a well-known lawyer name in Bridgeport. But at that point, you're married, you have children, It's 1990. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. I mean, I had not been married yet and didn't have children yet, but I had a relationship with, but then would have been my future wife, sure. And I was practicing law with all theGanims that we know in this area are somehow related.
Yeah.
I've got 7 siblings. My dad had 7 siblings. I've got cousins, and a lot of them of us, I guess, gravitated following my dad's generation from literally food peddlers with a garden center to what could be created through educational opportunities, many directed in the field of becoming lawyers. So there's probably, between my cousins, some carrying Ganim name and others, a lot. But yeah, so I was a part of, at that point, one of the offices, my dad's office. I'm the oldest second oldest child, but the oldest of the boys who became, 5 of us became lawyers, and my sister Mary, youngest, who passed, a lawyer as well. Now, I never practiced with all of them in the same office, because at some point in 91, and then in 93, I ran for office, and in 93 I was elected, and they were still kind of going through school. But so that was kind of the backdrop of where I was in that I'd moved to Bridgeport, been part of working with my dad, built a house, and moved back as a matter of choice. Again, at that point, I'd grown up until college, lived in Easton, which is as I described it earlier.
Where'd you go to law school?
I went to, it was the University of Bridgeport School of Law, right down the road here. And when I became mayor, similar to what the university is kind of faced with right now a little bit, there were some challenges and transitions, some mergers and acquisitions and so on. And Quinnipiac Law School ended up basically with whatever was the University of Bridgeport Law School, and it now is in, I guess it's Hamden. So I have a diploma. It's literally, they gave you, I have my UB Juris Doctorate and my University of Quinnipiac. They give you one because when you have to say where you went to school. So that was the outgrowth of that.
Yeah, I think
I'm not a practicing lawyer. I'm not a practicing attorney. I voluntarily, when all this happened, surrendered my license. I've tried to regain it, which is another reentry story, which we can talk about or not. Whether there will ever be acceptability by the Connecticut bar to allow. They seem to be open to people with let's call it a past, more recently allowing them to reenter, but that's a whole other challenge.
So you must have known, just to back up, most people who are convicted of white-collar crimes, they're generally successful professionals or in financial services, and you're a successful lawyer in a successful business, and you decide that you want to go into public service, which in some ways has its own limitations. You certainly can't make as much money as a mayor as you could as a successful lawyer. So what kind of considerations did you have to devote your life to public service and to realize that this was going to have to be, this is a full-time gig. This is something you got to do and you got to commit yourself to.
Yeah, absolutely. It meant kind of stepping away from anything else that consumed a lot of time, and especially at the time when I took over. And you're starting now, I don't know age of listeners, but at the time it was considered very young. I was 29. And the perspective of being running for mayor was daunting, and then actually being mayor. So yeah, it's all time consuming. Just like when I found myself when you get into these the political campaign, you'll watch them now. The most visible, Biden and Trump, or anybody else you see running competitively. They're not doing a heck of a lot else from the time they sleep to the time they go to bed, and anybody around them is probably not doing anything else either if they're in a competitive race. So that whole process, I found just had a sideline anything I was doing professionally, just running. Never mind getting elected, whether you're elected or not. Because I ran first in 91, and so for 2 or 3 months, I was part of a law practice, but everybody else was kind of picking up the slack for me, which probably wasn't fair either.
Yeah.
So it becomes all consuming. You're right. And then you've got to want to do, if you're going to do public service, and I don't know a lot. I think probably one of the reasons we're talking is because there's not a lot of people who have been through a process where they end up with a conviction, maybe been incarcerated, and then feel that this is like, oh, this is easy. I'm going to go get elected. It's not like the road. If you're going to lay out any type of logical course, it's probably not one that's you're going to think has a real good chance of being success at. So when we're talking about reentry, unless you've kind of been there before and you think that there's an understanding of who you are, who you were, if you've changed before, it's probably not where you want to go. But I did it originally thinking I was somewhat young and naive, so I thought I could do a better job, could actually make a difference. I thought I had a skill set, although hard to define exactly what that skill set is in these jobs, that could move the ball, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I thought that would be personally rewarding. And granted, it's not a monetary thing. There's limitations. I didn't realize the amount of how much of yourself you have to give beyond your own time and putting aside a career, because your mayor, like most higher profile elected officials, not all, but like most, you are 24/7. If you're in the restaurant, and I'll use a stupid example, which will probably get more attention than I want. If you're in there picking your nose, somebody's probably going to take your picture and say, look, I got a picture again, I'm picking his nose. Well, they may not care if somebody else is. I generally don't pick my nose, just so you know, for your listeners. But you know what I mean? You're on all the time.
Yeah, of course.
And so, and that creates a profile in many people's minds of who you are, and you have to be conscious of that. Mm-hmm. You don't want to drop your guard, but you don't want to disrespect the office, certainly not intentionally, even in your, let's call it your off hours. Mm-hmm. So it is somewhat challenging as a human being, mm-hmm. because there isn't that kind of downtime. And sometimes you crave that kind of, let's just go out and not have to deal with that.
So while you're in your first set of terms, the first 5 terms, what is it, every 2 years you get?
Well, it's interesting. So when I was elected in 1991, and I might have mixed up the years earlier when we talked. When I was elected in 1991, I don't think I'm mixing them up now, but you get old. I'm not that brain's not working that well. So I'm looking for a cue card. Somebody say, you were elected in 91. It was a 2-year term. Mm-hmm. So Mayor of Bridgeport served 2-year terms. So every 2 years you had to run for re-election. Mm-hmm. And I had actually run in 1989 unsuccessfully in a party primary, a Democratic primary, very crowded field. And I came out towards the top of the field, not at the top, but towards the top. I think it was 3rd in a 6 or 7 person field. And so I established that I could get some votes. I had some credibility, and then I ran again. But it's a 2-year term, which is very, very difficult in these type of jobs, because all you're doing is making, not all you're doing, but a lot of what you're doing is making decisions, and decisions that impact people's lives, right? So you got to figure, no matter what you say, and I'll use a couple current examples if you want, you're going to get somebody who's probably going to be happy with you, or at least not unhappy with you, but you're clearly going to get somebody. And, you never know how large the group is. It's going to be unhappy with your decision.
Of course, yeah.
Put it this way. Here's a kind of an example that probably nobody listening to is probably first on the list, but it's out there. There's statutes now. With everything that's going on, the Columbus statute, like cities across the country.
Sure.
And you've got a group, and I happen to be part Italian-American, mm-hmm. that says, oh, no, we want the statue up. We honor Christopher Columbus, part American heritage. Italian-Americans went through discrimination and so on, and there was a point in time where we got together. They mm-hmm. called it, and there were statues, and Columbus was one of the most prominent. And then you have history that comes to light. Maybe we say, wait a minute, this guy was. You don't have this history right, and if you believe that this is a country of opportunity and fairness and everyone's equal, then this statue needs to be torn down because it represents a part of, or an individual we shouldn't cherish or honor.
Sure.
And so you make a decision. Do you pick a side, if you will? You try not to. You try, but so you always. My point is, they're difficult jobs for a 2-year term. So I ran. I think 4 2-year terms.
And it's difficult because you're also always in an election cycle. It's always right. Running. Yeah.
So you get elected. Let's say in November, you've got maybe a clear year of runway where you can do stuff. And then after that, you're up against, oh, gee, I'm up for election in 7 months, and 8 months, and 6 months, 4 months, 2 months, 1 month. And you're like, do I want to get reelected? And how does this impact that? Because if you balance that out, take away your personal kind of, gee, I want to get reelected. It's, if I really do care about this job, I should probably look at trying to stay here. It's going to give me 2 more years to finish the work, continue the work. So, I mean, it's not necessarily just self-serving where they criticize people because they just want to get reelected. They want to get reelected for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, every 2 years I was doing that. So I did that in, if it was 91 to 93, 93 to 95, 95 to 97. And I think from, I can't remember exactly, but somewhere in there, there'd always been the talk of changing the term from a 2-year term to a 4-year term. And it's a charter change. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it has failed historically every time. I think, was in a position where we had made progress in the city of Bridgeport, had done a good job. And if you use the term in these offices, popularity, I think there was a strong feeling of popularity. I was getting reelected by 80% of the vote, 77% of the vote, 70. And I said to the voters, because they had a vote for this to change the term, I said, whoever's mayor needs a 4-year term. And so they passed a charter change. The only time in history they ever passed it and been shot down. And so my last term, the one I didn't finish, was a 4-year term.
Yeah.
But my successors who came into office had 4-year terms, and at least it allowed them that. And then when I came back in and was elected in 2015, it was to a 4-year term, and then in 2019 again to a 4-year term, which I'm serving now.
So without going into the weeds, so what happened in your last term? What happened? Because I really want to explore it, not from the standpoint of what happened in City Hall, but I really want to know.
I think the best way to do it, so we can pivot into reentry, is it was obviously involved with city government. A lot of people got either indicted or pled guilty. I was charged with a multiple count federal indictment. We'll use the term municipal corruption with the charges, if your audience is going to know this, because they've all been through this. Everything from mail fraud. Okay, I don't know anybody. Not too many people that go through the federal system don't get a mail fraud charge, right?
I'm one of them.
But conspiracy, RICO. I mean, there were serious charges.
Yeah.
And so following a verdict, a guilty verdict on a number of those, I was sentenced to 108 months, or 9, I guess effectively 9 years. And we all know how that works. You don't get a 30% of your time in the federal system. And I'm not criticizing or admiring the state system. These are all different. And so went through that, self-surrendered, went away, was in New Jersey, Fort Dix.
You served in the camp at Fort Dix?
Fort Dix. You go into at the time the camp was full, so I was in the low, which means low security for those that don't know. There's actually almost 2 separate kind of facilities there. I think it's an east and a west, with all the bells and whistles that you want on a federal prison, And that was a couple weeks, and then transitioned into the camp. And I got to tell you, as much as I was able to cope with the low, when you transition from a low to a camp, you really feel like there's a stress level that kind of, your stress level isn't gone, but it certainly is a reduced level.
Yeah.
That it seems to be a much more, and I know people spend decades in the system hoping they can work themselves down, ultimately to a camp for good reasons. It gives you a little bit more freedom. And
I served in a low. So
you served in a low?
Yeah.
Where'd you serve?
I served at Allenwood Low.
Okay.
When I went, the Allenwood Camp Club Fed had closed a year before, and so I had to serve my full 13 and a half months in there in a low, and it wasn't as difficult as people might believe. No,
the scuttle on the low at Allenwood was that you had a lot of area you could walk. You could go out, right? I mean, you could go out, almost get lost out in the fields, and it was kind of a preferable place to land there, so that's good for you.
Yeah.
Where some of them are, for instance, Fort Dix is confined. Yeah. It was very crowded. More people in a room than you'd like. It was enclosed. You couldn't just kind of wander off. Yeah. And I think it's one of the larger by population, probably in the country. I don't know that. I used to know all this stuff, but go ahead.
So, at the time that you were convicted, or that you were going through all of this, you're married, you have children. What's going on in your family? They must have. This must be a shock to everybody.
Yeah, devastating. Of course. Now, children were younger, so it doesn't mean that they didn't absorb or feel, or they understand, but they weren't at a level where you had a discussion about an adult discussion about everything. They were I think 7 and 6 and 7, and the baby, my youngest now, who's 18, was just being born. So he was born in the middle of this, so sure, it was about as rattling as something in life can be, without a doubt. Now, when I try and make it sound like, oh, it's something anybody can deal with, which it has to be, because by grace of God, it could be anything, could happen to anybody at any moment.
Sure.
I compare it to I'd always use, well, you know what? What about people that have a health problem? All of a sudden you go to a doctor's office and the doctor says, hey, I got some news for you. And I don't even like to have those discussions, but it happens every day.
Of course.
Sometimes those change people's lives, and generally not favorable. No doctor comes in and says, hey, guess what? You look like the most fit person, and you thought you were going to die at 99, but really, nobody tells you that. It's usually bad news.
Yeah.
So, I try and put it if there's an intellectual or unemotional way to deal with it, it's like, hey, look, if you think there's a clear path in life, you know how it's going to begin and how it's going to end and when it's going to begin and everything's going to happen, then you're doing better than me. If you ever think it's going to go perfect and nothing's not going to happen, whether it's your fault or somebody else's, or you look back at what you did yesterday and you said, oh, damn, I really screwed up. It's all part of it. So I in my own mental kind of way of dealing with it, without, shedding blame or guilt or absorbing it or whatever, it was one of those things where, yes, it was devastating, no question. But I don't want you to feel sorry for me like I'm unique. That's not the point. The point is that things happen to everyone, and some are much, much worse than something you've gone through or something I've gone through.
But I can imagine that one of the advantages that you had was that you had a big family and a family of lawyers too. So you had people to talk to. For so many people, when they go through this, it's instant isolation. You're cut off from your friends. You're cut off from your business associates. And you're going through it pretty much alone. I mean, your family must have been supportive. They must have been there for you, no?
Well, sure, and I'll touch on that. But the other part of it is, which maybe you're going to kind of bring up, is if you want that perspective that may be somewhat different than others, but I'm sure not everyone has family. I had a huge family, very supportive. As you say, also, this was not a field. It's like, doctor gives you a diagnosis, and if you got 5 doctors in the family, they can all explain it. It's not like it was foreign to us. We understood the lingo and the language.
Right.
And so I could have that conversation, no doubt. I guess there was some comfort in that. Didn't necessarily change the scenario. It just made us better able to cope with it. But the other side of that is, as much as I had that, and maybe as everyone I'd hope has too, friends and people they can talk to, I also had a whole thing that maybe a lot of people didn't have, was being so high profile.
Yeah.
Being in office at the time, while under indictment, while going through trial. Granted, just a mayor, so to speak, if you want to go to the higher levels. But mayor of the largest city, had been a candidate for governor, had been in a position to run statewide. So there was that whole level of, yes, you had and still have a lot of strong family support in my life, thank God. But the whole other level of difficulties of trying to do day-to-day life while mayor had changed dramatically too.
And you were under a lot of pressure to resign, weren't you?
Interesting. I was under political pressure by politicians.
Yeah.
I didn't hear, and nor did we receive, I would call it a grassroots effort or any groups. When I went out, and I did not go out, meaning to a diner or to events, I got a lot of, and I credit people with this because, some people do it, some people don't. I got a lot of the opposite, especially from the religious community. I got people that didn't judge, that were supportive, whether it was spiritually as a human being, whether it's because I was their mayor, that they felt some ownership. So there was a lot of that maybe others that I received I'd like to think because they knew me for whatever that 10 or 11 years was, or through my whole life. But there was a lot of that. There was very little visible, and this doesn't mean it wasn't there, of pressure or people, saying nasty things to my face or any of that. Now, certainly everybody goes through a little bit of that somewhere, either close up or from a distance. And I'm sure family members or people that are further, maybe one step away might get it or hear it or overhear it. But so I thank the people very much for that, going through all that.
But the party must have seen this as a problem. You took some heat internally, politically, yes?
Oh, tremendous. Yeah, of course, tremendous heat. Yeah, sure. Very, very difficult. I mean, as you would imagine. So it was one of the challenges to kind of deal with as you go through it.
Yeah.
There were your legal challenges, there were the political challenges, there were the personal challenges. Hey, how do you, all coming at you at the same time, right? Because the world's changed. I'm sure for anybody who's listening, the world is all of a sudden, it's either slowly and you knew it was coming, or it's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's going to look like in the future. Absolutely.
So what happens, you go to trial and you're found guilty, and then what happens personally? You're now preparing to go to prison, because and a part of this is trying to explain the process to people who are just entering.
Is it? Do we have an audience that's still just entering?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, look, you can anybody who's gone through it can share their personal experiences. A lot of commonalities, I'm sure. And there's no, what I did was I became, as soon as I knew that was going to happen, I became completely absorbed in all the information that was out there, whether it was put out by the federal government, was put out by formerly incarcerated, the books. I don't know whether there's a new round of books in the last 10 years or so, but there were people that had written their books about what to do, what not to do, how to ease it, how to try to challenge they had met with their families, and what you can expect. I mean, what you want to know is you want answers. You're not going to be able to control anything for a while, but you certainly want to know what to expect, and then you want to share that with the people that you care about that are going to be impacted in your life, that are already impacted in your life, as best you can. And there was always a feeling when you were inside, to a certain extent, once you get settled in, that if the people you care about were okay, and we used to always say, if they're okay, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of what their lives would be impacted by was, you. And however you absorb that, with personal guilt, with whatever your feelings were, there's always that feeling, Jesus, is my family kind of okay?
Yeah.
I think. But going through the process, certainly, I was getting prepared, trying to learn everything I could, and then share it. And then, there's financial considerations, there's personal considerations, there's children, how is this affecting my children? Are they showing any signs of what do you see? And then how do we deal with it? How do you talk to them about it? So,
how much time were you given to report?
So as I remember, I think it was, I think what would happen time-wise was it was the middle of September, because I wanted to get the kids relocated. Schools had to be changed. It was a new house, and kids were going. So I wanted to be a part of, and the court was kind enough to allow me, I think, till the middle of September to self-surrender.
Just for people who don't know, self-surrender means you were driven, someone went with you and drove all the way to New Jersey to Fort Dixon, where you actually surrendered.
Right. Right. And right. Which is a preferable way for anyone if you're going to enter the system. If you can self-surrender to the location where you're going to be in the federal system, that you and I would both agree, that's the preferable route, rather than going through having the system, have you go locally and then get transported, which is really said you don't want to be transported if you're going to.
Getting
what did you do? Did you self-surrender?
Oh yeah, I self-surrendered, but
in Allenwood.
In Allenwood, yeah. And I had some friends drive me out. I didn't have family drive me out. I didn't want to put them through it. Who drove you out?
Yeah, I probably should have done it the other way too. Yeah, it's difficult.
So now you report to prison, and you know you're going to be there for a while. How long did you serve for?
Well, I had 108 months, which is 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I served, I don't know the exact amount, but a little over 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did with my children, just to pivot into another topic, because it was obviously a longer sentence, which is, I mean, it was an eternity. But when I got there, there was a guy trying to make light of some of this. So, you usually get the top bunk, right? Unless you got a lower bunk pass.
Yeah.
You're like, what is he talking about? But I mean, these are like, there's only a few elements of your life at that point. If you got a pair of shower shoes and you got a pair of sneakers, you're really on top of the world. And you're usually going to get a bunk and you got a locker.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know what every place looks like, but it's not a lot there.
It's pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And upper bunks are usually less preferable, I guess. But the guy who was sleeping below had said that, and I'll use the terms. So I jumped in, and I'm ready to I don't want to use extreme terms, but you're just about as low as you can get, right?
Yeah.
And you're there, and you got your own personal kind of challenges, meaning you as a human being. But then you're thinking everybody who just left, and you're like, oof, how do you do all this? But he goes, oh yeah. He says, good, nice to meet you. And I tried to go in as lower profile as I could, but regardless, you go in. And so I get up there and I'm thinking, the world's going to end. I got 100 and whatever it is. I got 9 years, right?
Yeah.
What's 15% off of 9? Do the math 100 different ways. It doesn't change, right? It doesn't get any better.
No.
And you're doing your math on how old you are, how old you're going to be, how old your kids are going to be. And anyway, so he goes, oh, okay. Nice to meet you. He said he had 188 months and he just worked his way down to a camp when I got to the camp.
Wow.
And he said, I'm short. Short means I'm going to, I know you did, what'd you say you did? How much time did you do? How many months?
I had 18-month sentence. I did 13 and a half. I was short from the day I walked in.
Yeah. So he goes, I'm short. And I wasn't really sure what short meant, but he meant I don't have much time left. I said, oh, shoot, this guy's going home in a couple of weeks, in a couple months. He goes, yeah, I got 2 years left. I'm like, that's short? I said, wow, that's, and this guy, I said, if he can make it through 100, and he looked like he was on top of the world. He was in good shape. His hair was groomed. He was busy doing this. And I says, there was a moment where I said, damn, if this guy can do, if he considers himself at the back end of 188 months, I guess I can get through this too. So the point was perspective on where you are and what you're doing, whether you're in a camp, whether you're in a low, whether you've got a health problem, whether you lose your job, whatever it is. It's like, if you can kind of just take that moment and kind of grasp it, and I can remember it to today. So
you were in a barrack. Did you have cubicles in the barrack?
Well, again, there was a couple different moments. We first went in at Fort Dix. It was on the military base, of course, but it also was former dormitories for some federal program with, I want to say, Ukrainian, whoever. And so it was not. It was dormitory. Some had 2 beds in them with a door. So it was like some of them were actually fairly accommodating, but more regular there were 8, and I think there was as many as 12.
Yeah.
But they transitioned to a new camp. I volunteered to help build a new camp. Actually got like an award from the warden with a bunch of others, saying thank you. We actually worked and helped construct it. And then we were in huge dormitory style. Yeah. Which I think there were 2 sides to it, which is probably still exists that way now. Probably 120 and 120 or whatever the size of it is now. And there was this, I don't know what it's like now, but there was an overcrowding problem where it was, you were packed in pretty good. Whatever the minimum amount of space you had between beds and all that. And it was always great to have, 10 or 20 people who can snore as loud as they could in the same area. But I guess if that was the worst problem you had, you were doing all right.
In the middle of the night, it could be a big problem. That all these little things kind of resonate, right?
Yeah, it's interesting how, and I'm careful on how to talk about it because they don't want to make it sound, you don't want to sit there. And again, I know we have an audience, but there'll be a broader audience too, which I want to understand. So you don't, I want to be fair about how trying to make it sound light and how people deal with it, but at the same time, real. It's devastating, and so I'm just trying to balance that as we have this discussion. It's interesting. We talked yesterday or 2 days ago at the MIRA program, which is the mayor's reentry. It's our program in Bridgeport for reentry, which we partnered on. And Ernie Newton, who's also formerly incarcerated, talked very eloquently about the challenges that his children had, because the funding that was received was to help build the bond for reentry for returning citizen fathers, I think. Now, mothers is even more difficult, but I'm sure this was to kind of help fathers kind of get back on their feet and their children. And he spoke very eloquently, and I don't know how he did it without kind of getting too emotional, especially when you're talking about your children and those things. But he did, and he said, his children had some challenges while he was away, and other kids and that kind of thing. So I'm glad we're able to kind of do that. But I guess what I'm saying is it's very, very difficult. You try and make, even when you're there, as you know, you try and make the best of a bad situation. And you look at these little things, maybe an extra piece of fruit when you get to eat that, kind of makes your day. It's sad that's what it is, but it's supposed to be in some ways penal. It's supposed to be a hope of rehabilitating and putting people in a position to have a better life when they come out. And that's one of the things that hopefully we're going to talk about more.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd acknowledge that. It's difficult to talk about because it's people living on the brink, but it's still a community. And it's like walking into a recovery room. If you walk into an AA room, for example, half the time everybody's laughing because everybody is sharing this common experience. And it could be absurd, but you still have to survive. And if you're there for months or years, it's the full range of human experience. And
I will tell you this too, just to that point, and then maybe we can pivot into some more reentry stuff. Mm-hmm. But you really, people are judged inside over an extended period of time by who you are at that point. It's not who you were. In other words, it's not you were a counselor, you were a doctor, you were whatever. Yeah. It's how you interact from the moment you get there with the people around you. And then you either, I don't want to say rise or fall on your stature, if you will, or the respect that you get. Some of it's by age. We all like to, human nature. But it's also about, no, that's a good guy. And that reputation is all, to a certain extent, all that there is. Somebody else says something that's a good guy, or that's a bad guy. Stay away from him. Or that guy's there's not a lot of places to run or hide. You can't go to a new neighborhood, to a new city. You can't go to find a new group of friends. That's it. And that's you. And that's who you're going to be through that whole period of time. And that's, it's a very revealing human experience in that way. And that's with other people that are incarcerated. That's with the people that are coming around with the uniforms on. I mean, there's not a lot. It's not because you have a nicer jacket on or a different watch or a different hair. It's just who you are. You're all dressed the same. And it's how you interact with who you are as a human being with other human beings, whether it's at lunch, at dinner, whether it's in line to go to whatever you're lining up for, a shower, whether it's out in the rec. And it's a very human revealing. And I think to know about everyone there, and you learn a lot about yourself because of how people kind of treat you because of how you treated them.
I learned a lot of things in prison that I probably should have learned in kindergarten. I learned about respect and care of others and how to watch what I say and how to be appropriate. I took all those things for granted. And I learned probably that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead. You learned probably what?
I learned probably that it was much more important to listen in life than it is to talk.
Yeah. And then what I figured out was, the whole thing with this guy's doing all this time and I got all this time and time, right? You realize there's also people that, everyone, I like to categorize as everyone because it made me feel more committed to doing something, had a more difficult time than me, and had less on the inside and less on the outside. That doesn't mean, I don't mean money. I just mean less in life. And so I made a real clear commitment early on because I had a skill set, which, being a lawyer is a huge skill set in there, to work in the law library, I helped anybody and everybody who wanted help, and everybody had an issue or thought they had an issue, for an appeal, right?
Sure.
You call them 2255s, or were being treated wrongly or whatever, or didn't get halfway house in time, or didn't get into a program, or, there was and so I was doing, assisting appropriately anybody I could in the law library, finding books. Oh, a new case came out. Look what they did with the sentencing guidelines. You should challenge that, that kind of stuff. I tried to express myself, not as a lawyer, but just as someone who could help people.
Sure.
And that was so well received. And then I pivoted into self-improvement I became I took a personal training course. So I'm nationally certified as a weightlift, and resistance and running and nutrition. So I spent my time well with that to learn more about myself. But I also taught courses. They offered opportunities. I taught courses on real estate, on home ownership, first time buying a house. And I was able to have my brother send me in what a mortgage document looked like, and a mortgage deed, and an application. And, and there's nowhere on there where it asks you if you're a felony. And I would point that out to people. They don't care. What they care about is, did you ever go bankrupt? Did you ever have a financial problem?
Right.
So as soon as you get out, if you're in a position and you want to, they call it the American dream. If you've never owned a home, it's not that complicated. You should try and do it. So I taught that course. And then I did a survey of what other people would want to hear about and learn about. And I felt if I was qualified enough. So I worked with the administration in the camp to do that. And then I took to things like, I took on projects outside. I can help convert the place to, recycling was coming in and it wasn't mandated. So I asked if I could start a recycling program. So they said, yeah, go at it. So we put separate bins in for plastics and for paper, because there's tons of plastics and paper. And, can you believe it? I'm saying, it's a federal government. It's like when I was in local government, we started recycling. We don't have recycling in here. So, I mean, it sounds kind of stupid. You're in there, what do you care about recycling? But these were things that I thought were the good things to do. Within that, it was a community, I don't glorify it as a community, but as a group of human beings and individuals who had an impact both on ourselves and each other and outward. So those were a few things. I'm sure there's more, but I dove into a full-time commitment. As I got up every day, what classes am I teaching today? Is that we've done the recycling out there? Who's taking care of the outside? They had a hydroponics of where they're growing tomatoes out there to help build that. I said, no, I'll volunteer for that. Let me help. Let me do that. And then it put me in a position to encourage other people to do the same thing. And I think there were some people that came out of there with some real good skills and trades.
And a lot of certificates, right? You get a lot of certificates.
I got a lot of certificates. I've got stacks of them. I've got stacks of them, and I used to give them out and get them. But you know what? See, look, you had to go. If you didn't have a high school diploma, there was I don't know if it was mandatory or not, but you had to go to class.
Yeah, it was mandatory.
I taught reading. I remember teaching older gentlemen how to read and write. Just say, look, you kind of need to figure. You got time right now. Figure it out. Let's do it. I'm here. I got time. You're here. You got time. Yeah, we can go watch TV maybe, but let's, if you want it, I'm here to help do it. And I still thank you notes of, older gentlemen who could barely write saying thank you for helping me to kind of literacy. So those things were rewarding. They're in the big world, they kind of get lost. But when you're in there and it's one-on-one with someone, it's what hopefully what you look, or what I look to do anyways.
Well, I think it's incredibly important because it's really, it really tests yourself. Like what's important is you don't get applause for it. This is about your personal growth and what you want to give back to the particular community you're living in right now.
So coming out, so fast forward back into office, right? Yeah. Two things I think we should touch on if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
If you want to talk about. One was the decision process, if there was one, if the rational decision process. Again, there was a decision process. The question was rational at the time to look towards going into the public eye, for asking for public trust again after all that had happened, and then what we've done since then in partnership through the Myra program to help others with reentry.
Yeah.
I think that as much as some would, and they do this, I don't know, in a flattering way, but I guess they use the word, these superlative words about remarkable and improbable and all that because of the pundits, if you will, in the world of politics, they would say, no, you can't. It'll never be done. What are you, stupid? I won't stand next to you, and many wouldn't. But I will tell you, and I'll talk about that, and some of it's a flattering discussion because we won, right? Some would have laughed. It would just be laughter if we had lost. But I will tell you, I don't think we've done enough is since being in office with the voice that on reentry, with helping to push things like we're pushing more now for reentry in the city of Bridgeport and beyond. And I've just started to try and do more nationally. I'm part of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is a national organization, very well-respected organization of the most prominent mayors in the country, which I sit on the advisory board, but I'm also now chair of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee or vice chair of reentry.
That's awesome.
So we've raised it to that level where we've had conferences where other mayors, and I was surprised at the level of interest, who said, hey, yeah, maybe I wasn't, maybe I'm not in the same personal situation you are, Joe, but my dad was.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is what happened to my father. And so I know it from that firsthand experience. Or others certainly have, brothers and sisters, siblings or friends or someone else. And I saw a large amount of interest in the one committee group that we did, where it spurred us on to talk about how, and I've taken and participated now more recently in things like, how do we encourage people who have a felony conviction in the states where they can vote to register to vote and to vote, and not just say, that's part of the system. That's part of the federal government and the whole federal government, if you still got anxiety over what happened and if it's still an us versus them kind of thing in your own mind, that you're not going to vote anymore because it doesn't count. To encourage them, because there's millions and millions, unfortunately, of ex-felons who have a right to vote and many who don't. And if you do the math on it, and I'm not good enough to do it, when you break these things down and you look at it, and if that becomes one issue, it can impact an election.
Sure.
Local, state, or even a federal election, if it was ever organized the right way. And hopefully for the right reasons, that we want to give people the opportunity. We want to create situations where, in this country, which we incarcerate more people than any place else in the whole world per population, that the punitive aspect of it is certainly something that you want to send home if it helps prevent. But the rehabilitation part of it is really where we should be. We all need to be a part of that. In other words, whether it's in the system or when you come out. If you can't do it in the system, because the system's brutal, as light as we make about, some of the things that, whether you get upper bunk or lower bunk, and whether all that kind of stuff, is brutal. It tears apart families. Yeah. It destroys lives if they're not destroyed already. And let's say that, these are, everybody goes and deserve, they give a pound of flesh back to society. But what good is done on the afterwards if we don't put resources in, if you don't allow and support, or at least create the opportunity for every individual to become maybe not the same place that they were, but a contributing member. If you lose them, you're probably going to lose part of their family, maybe all of their family. You're going to certainly severely impact their family. And then, I don't know, you can go from there, how that impacts a neighborhood, a city, and so on. So I want to do more with that. I guess what I'm saying is I'm happy to a certain extent with the amount we've been able to do locally here. In some ways we're looked at as a leader, maybe because, I'm in office and because of my past, but I don't think we're as strong a leader right now as we could be on the whole dialogue and substance of reentry. And that's why I appreciate what you're doing, because you're at it every day, every week, and you provide a platform. So I want to do more.
Joe, one of the things I want to make sure that we hit before we end is that when people come home from prison, they're in trauma. They're afraid. They're afraid of taking risks. They're afraid of getting jobs. They're getting turned down. What I find the most fascinating part of your story is that you decided to take a risk. It's a big risk because you ran for public office again. So what goes into the decision making, and what are the takeaways that other guys and women might get from your story when they're coming out of prison and they know they have to re-engage life, but they're afraid to do it?
Mm-hmm. So interesting, because I think everybody's story is probably a little bit different, and their surroundings, and so I've always taken the perspective that, as I kind of shared earlier, that I had a lot. You talked about large family, wasn't in a situation where I had to worry about having a place to live afterwards because of family support. Made it, let's just say, not as devastating as it might be for others. So what those personal hurdles are in everyone's life, I don't know. As happy as that day is that you walk out, right? I don't care if you were there for a day, for a year, for 10 years, for 20 years. The day you actually walk out, certainly with some still restrictions that remain, even if you walk out with nothing, if they let you out naked, right, and without a dollar in your pocket, you'd still be the happiest day. They don't give you much more than that when you walk out. Hopefully you get the regular clothes to wear again, which is a good feeling in and of itself, to put on a pair of jeans. But there is that willingness to, with some common sense, continue to fight and persevere over those barriers, because they're there. Mm-hmm. I think the best examples of ways to work through it is to build, not be afraid, figure out what your goals are, but to build them on a solid foundation. And if you can, with people that know you, mm-hmm. that know a lot about you, that know, let's call it the bad, but also the good, and they're willing to work with you on the good. I had a guy who knew me fairly well, names will remain, who I was driving home. I've been home for about a week. Pulled up next to me, and I was in my dad's car because I didn't have a car, and told me to roll down the window. I didn't recognize him, and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" Hey, good. How are you? Let's connect. And I was like, "Yeah, this guy doesn't. I barely talked to this guy. He didn't care." But he did, and he reached out and he said, "Let's go to lunch." And I said, "Well, I can't really go anywhere. There's no restriction." He said, "Well, I'll come up to your, where you're living, and we can have a cup of coffee." When I was away, at some point, gave me an opportunity, in addition to what I was doing, to try and figure out what I was doing professionally. And so I point that out to you unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Because there are people out there that if you make yourself available, there's going to be people out there that want to hurt you. They're never going to forgive or never going to give you a fair break, let's say, like in life in general. And they got a perfect reason for it now, right? They got a perfect reason. But there's also people that just are going to be good people that see the good in people.
That's
and
true.
Going to create opportunities. And then when that happens, and it will happen, I can almost guarantee, if you put yourself in that position, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you put yourself with that mindset, that you're saying, "Damn it, I'm going to go out, I'm going to figure this thing out, and I'm going to look for people that will help me figure it out for all the right reasons," they're going to be there. And then just build on that foundation and level, whether it's over a week, over a month, over a year. And now you've got that, and whether it's in a job that someone gave you, whether it's in a part, whatever it is, I think that foundation puts you further and further away from, or reduces whatever you thought that barrier was from the beginning. Mine was somewhat different than many people that you're going to talk to. Many listeners are not going to run for public office. They're just not going to. If they did before, they might again. But even through that, Buddy Cianci was probably the most popular mayor in Rhode Island's history. He tried, and that became a very difficult thing, and he didn't. So it's a very difficult thing. But whatever it is, wherever you want to go, whether it's a change in life, which you might want to look at, if you were whatever you. The important thing is, I think, where you want to do this is not to be afraid of that challenge. Mine was so difficult because it gave people an opportunity to take their free shots at me publicly and privately, to laugh at even the thought, "This guy's going to run for mayor again? Are you kidding me?" Why would we ever trust or allow that to happen again?
Yeah. Joe, so your family's been through hell for 10 years. And one day you walk into the kitchen and you say to your wife, "Honey, I got a great idea. I'm going to run for mayor again." Did they think you were out of your mind?
Well, yeah, and so it's a longer story than that, of course. But and if you want to talk about it, we could. I don't know how that. My example. So the takeaway for people generally, I think, on what was with me was, did people that were close to me, in this case it was mostly my children, brothers and sisters, and parents, to a certain extent, how did they feel about what direction I wanted to go in?
Yeah.
Did they think it was a good direction for me? But you don't really say this, but for them as well.
Yeah, it's drawing a lot of attention.
Absolutely. And so in my example, as you're right, it may not be for everyone else. You're right. You don't do it, in a vacuum. You don't go apply for a job and it's you and the guy. If it's a small company, there's 4 people. It's between you and them, and and your world changes maybe in a good way. No, mine was, you make these big public announcements and you start talking to hundreds, thousands, in this case, probably tens of thousands of people, talking to reporters. Sometimes in this case, because it was so different, it was certainly broad-based news and comments. And some of the comments you can't control. But there was a discussion with my kids that around Christmas time, which was, hey, look, what do you think? And so you get, as you might with any group of 3 people, right? Especially your kids, you probably get 3 different opinions. And the ones that were the ones that were kind of supportive were like quickly, oh, that's a good idea. You should do this. I said, well, slow down. You got to remember, there's going to be a group of people that say, oh, Jesus, Joe, that's Joe Ganim, whatever, the mayor. They're going to accuse me of everything from stealing a hot stove to anything that bad happens. And all you're going to hear is bad, 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 bad. But I did tell them, which I believe, and I guess proved to be at least in part true, that there are people that do recognize that, I was a good mayor, did a lot of good, and most importantly, could make a positive contribution in the future, regardless of what had happened. I don't say regardless, meaning ignoring it. I mean, and so I said, guys, we're going to hear everything. Don't think this is all going to be just because we're around people that say good things about you and me and everybody that you're going to hear good things. They're like, no, Dad, we get that. So we had the discussion about both sides of it. But at the end, I think what carried the day was, I think there was at least my feelings that I could do this job again, that although it was a difficult, long shot, that maybe I could get in a position to be here, but that I could make a positive contribution, and I thought better than others had in the past. So it really didn't center around, which is probably not a good analysis for listeners. It didn't really center around what I thought was, my best opportunity, because I had other opportunities. As you pointed out, it wasn't like, oh, geez, this is the job. And people tried to say that, oh, he wants to be mayor because, this is because he can't get his law license back or because he can't do this. I mean, just granted to say, I do come, there was a strong element of, I thought I could do. I thought it was a good move at the time. Certainly not as in basketball terms, a layup, but we did have those discussions. But this again is unique, and because it always creates an opportunity for highly public criticism, for public mistakes, small or large, and it does put anyone who sits in the mayor's seat, whether you have especially one with a past, in a position where you have 4,000 people that work with you or for you that could make a mistake that somehow you get associated with, whether you knew about it or not.
Yeah.
And so those type of things in this position, just talking about mayor and me for a minute, all elements that probably would make someone think twice or 3 times about it. But to everyone else is out there, I hope that we've created and continue to create, at least in Bridgeport, and I hope beyond through what you do and what other people do around the country, a reduction or minimizing, or I don't want to say completely eliminating, because we haven't, many of the barriers in our society by interaction, whether it's providing programs, meeting people when they come home, and giving them the things that, simple things that we take for granted every day in life, whether they're just to get by for a few days, or how to create a resume or fill out a job application. I did that too. I also taught that well inside. We went through the whole process. We'd sat down, and you probably did it too. People sit down and we did mock interviews. You know, myself and a couple other people were former professionals, and we asked questions. And we dealt with the question of, well, tell me about, you know, are you going to tell them in the interview? Do you put it on the application, you know, and you can't lie? And how do you deal with it? If you get to the interview stage, you can explain what happened and ask for an opportunity. And that's the hardest barrier, I think, is getting that opportunity.
Yeah.
Because if you and me and the other person are a good person, once they're in that job for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we all know. You work with someone for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, you pretty much got a pretty good feeling, you know, that they're heading in the right direction. Doesn't mean they can't make a mistake or do something wrong. But I think that's where people get a chance to prove themselves. So I'd encourage everyone, if you get how to figure out how to get through that barrier is to get yourself in a position where you can prove yourself as a person to someone, and then not, you know, back away from that or let that kind of go by the wayside. And then I think then the doors open. And once the doors are open, at least with where you're going, you know, you can rise or fail on your own. And that's all we can ask for in life.
Well, I think that's a great takeaway here, because many people who come home from prison, maybe even most, they're their own limiting step. They're their own barrier. And in my experience, I found that while there are a lot of difficulties out there and there's no getting around that, I have to be willing to take the step. Once I'm willing to put myself out there, then at least there's the possibility of good things happening. But if you're going to cower and not come out of your house and think that the whole world's against you, then you don't even have a chance.
Right. Absolutely. And it's difficult. And by the way, you know, we're talking about it to a certain extent, not intentionally, but I'm going to bring it up because we have to, in a vacuum where we're not even recognizing that probably there's a good percentage that have substance abuse problems.
Sure.
Maybe need help with, you know, other social issues, or maybe who knows? Mm-hmm. And, you know, maybe you and I don't have those, thank God. But, you know, there's that compounding of that, which probably make it even more difficult. Mm-hmm. I don't have an answer for people other than the one you just gave, which is you need to step up, take your time, figure it out, trust the people that are around you to agree or disagree with you, give you good advice and support, lean on them a little bit. In other words, but do it the right way. If they're going to help you, make sure that you honor their help. And because I do think it really makes a difference when you do have, whether it's family member, someone's close, or someone who's an employer who gives you that opportunity to take it. I tell people when they come to the city and they want a certain job, I don't tell them directly, but I use it as a philosophy. I said, even if you don't get the one you want, maybe it's the top of the department, if there's one offer to you and you think it works and that you can make a contribution, take it. And then you're going to rise through. People are going to go and say, hey, look it. Joe Ganim did a really good job at sweeping streets. You know what?
Yeah.
I think he should be driving the truck. Mm-hmm. I think we need somebody to drive that truck. And then, we need somebody to run organize the fleet, make sure the trucks are out on time. I mean, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Just going to happen by the way life goes on. Every day something changes, somebody comes, somebody goes. So you may want to be at that same position you were at. And again, somebody may have been in a profession, but there's other ways to approach it. And I would just ask them to keep going. I'd ask them to look at what, interact with others, see what successes they've had. Mm-hmm. Get over whether it's self-pity or guilt or somebody owes you something, on either end of it, whether you feel guilty and ashamed about what happened, absorb it. When I ran for governor, I went all over the state, as difficult as it was, and I told people my story. I got criticized when I went for my law license because they said there wasn't enough, I hadn't been clear about saying I'm sorry and absorbing guilt and redemption, whether they were right or wrong, regardless. But I went around the state, and I don't know whether it was a recipe for success to run for governor, but I thought it was a recipe for me to get out and talk about who I was, that I'd been successful, had been up and down, been up again, at least in the elected political world, and thought that I had something to contribute, and I wasn't going to hide from it. I wasn't going to run away from it. And if you want to find a place to put it out there where you're going to open yourself to criticism, go run around Connecticut and tell them that you've got a past and you want them to vote for you. It's a very difficult scenario. So I'd ask people not to let them be deterred by that. Yeah. I'm not saying you need to lead with it. I don't think you lead with it in your life, because it may not give people an opportunity to understand all the other qualities that you have. all the other good things. But I don't think you run away from it. And if you can do that and set your goals, and you got to work hard at them too. Some of it's through education, some of it's through job training, some of it's through creating relationships. Then, that's going to be what helps and going to help you and me, or you or them, but also anyone else. Because as more individuals become successful after having a past, of being incarcerated with a felony conviction, the more people that are successful, the more it makes it a norm, and more it makes it so that the next person will have to be given that opportunity.
Sure.
And I think that's the critical element, that if you can kind of carry that through, we're just part of the kind of the transition for everyone who's going in and coming out. We all have kind of a role to play in trying to be successful, so that we can create opportunity for success.
Well, the rising tide lifts all boats, so
Right.
It's our job. So we have a white collar support group, as you know, on an online support group that meets on Monday nights. This coming Monday night is our 227th weekly meeting. So we've been doing it for 4.5 years now. And on any given Monday night that you'd like, we would be honored if you come on.
Yeah, I want to.
And
as long as I don't have a council meeting on Monday nights, that's my every other one. So I think we're okay this Monday night. If I'd like to try and get on there, and we can confirm with you by then.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have that you get the invitation, you get the login information, because I think people would be tickled pink to have you come on and to be able to give you a message of hope and risk-taking, appropriate risk-taking, because people they're just suffering. There's so much trauma, and they need to know that people are blazing a trail like you have. So thank you so much for
interesting. I'll leave this as a takeaway. As much as I said, there's a lot of superlatives around, the redemption and getting back in office and the challenge and all that. And I also admittedly said, I think we need to do more. I need to do more. Our city needs to do more with programs and encourage other mayors because of, for better or for worse, me being here. There was one, I went up to Danbury. It used to be women's, now it's men's again. I spoke at Danbury, Federal Correction. I'm not sure if it's a camp or not. But anyways, I went and spoke, talked a bit about my experiences and answered questions and so on. And I encouraged people, look, you got time now. Prepare for your life afterwards. If you've got a number, if you've got a date, in other words, you don't have a life sentence, you're gonna have a point in time afterwards where you are gonna walk out of here.
Yeah.
And so the best thing you can do is, one of the best things you can do is prepare yourself for that as best you can, right? And so it must have absorbed the one guy, because I was our fire department does a fire test, and we ban the box, and so it doesn't matter if you have a felony conviction or not. And I'm trying to maintain my physical fitness, so I took their physical test, which is grueling.
Yeah, of course.
So while I was over there, this guy, young guy, probably in his mid 30s, comes up to me. He's all buffed up, shape and everything, and I'm kind of the old guy, trying to get through the mill on it. Anyways, he comes up to me and he says, you don't remember me, but I was in Danbury when you came and spoke.
Oh.
And I don't want to overstate that I inspired him, but he said, he said a bunch of other stuff, and then he said, isn't it amazing? He said, we're both standing here now. After that, I said to myself, I'm going to go try. There's nothing that can stop me. And he was taking a fire test to be a fireman in the city of Bridgeport. And I mean, that's a pretty elevating feeling and locked up. Yeah. And to have gone back and said, shoot, I remember when you came and talked to us and we were locked up, and now I'm standing here in the fire training academy. It was kind of a nice, rewarding thing to say. Maybe there were a couple words there that encouraged him, and hopefully he passed the test and he becomes a Bridgeport fireman.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So as an example, in addition to everything you're doing, maybe what people might see in me because I got elected and others, I think you look at someone like that and say, wow, that's pretty cool.
Well, I want to thank you for being so giving and generous with your time and your words. I know that there's a lot of different people who are going to be watching this, but everyone can attach to your message of hope and of overcoming obstacles. So I want to thank you for that, Joe.
Well, I want to thank you as I haven't done enough from the beginning and your focus on, as I said, I see behind you again, so I'm going to say it, for people, helping them find hope and purpose after being incarcerated. But not only just that, not just putting it out there, putting it out there, as you said, for 227 weeks, where somebody can just dial the phone and find out, you know what, I'm not alone in this thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that are going through similar struggles. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for saying that. Blessings to you and to your family, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on White Collar Week, sponsored by Progressive Prison Ministries. You can learn more about us on our website, prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist. And please remember to rate, review, and share this podcast so that families suffering in silence can find us if they need us. See you next time.